Hello, I'm Kristy Wallace, and this is Suddenly I See, a podcast which explores the power of a positive mindset, gratitude, and love in changing your life for the better. Join me as I share the mind hacks, rituals, and choices that have helped me survive and thrive in the face of adversity to arrive at a point where suddenly I see what truly matters in this life. Let's get started. Thank you so much for joining me on episode 3. In this episode, I want to talk about coming home, and there was a really emotional time for us. As I mentioned in the last episode, coming home had a lot of positive emotions in that we felt so relieved and were so excited to see Audrey and so grateful that we got to take Paddy home from the hospital. But we underestimated as well the feelings of fear and grief that would also come with returning home. So I guess while we were in Sydney, we took so much comfort in knowing the nurses were taking care of Paddy for us and they were regulating his health and his medications. Whereas when we got home, suddenly we were now responsible for all of his medical needs and essentially keeping him alive, which was a huge undertaking. And Paddy was having, 5 medications 3 times a day. And so I clearly remember when we first got home that night, our families were there and it was just, such excitement, but at the same time, oh my gosh, he's due for his tablets. Hold on, guys, we've got to just get these done at the right time so that we're consistent. Just for our parents to watch us do that and see how overwhelming our new undertaking was a real eye-opening moment for everyone. The other thing that we underestimated at the time was how tricky it is to walk back into your old life where the furniture's the same and the people are the same. And for all intents and purposes, it seems like your life, but you have changed so much because of what you've been through that you feel foreign in your own environment. And I really, at the time, I kind of felt it a bit, but I underestimated the impact that would have on me long term. It's only something that when I look back in hindsight, I'm like, yeah, things were different, but you didn't really realize the full power of that just yet. But I think it's important for people to know that it is a really polarizing feeling to be coming back to something that seems so familiar in your old life, but also now needing to create a new one because nothing can be the same as it was. And I think they tried to warn us about that in Sydney, and they talked a lot about this new normal. You'll get home and you'll just start your new normal. And we thought, oh, what a wanky concept. Like, we don't need a new normal, thanks. We'll just run with what we had. But it actually made our life harder because we were trying to be the same people we were before this happened and the same family when that wasn't the case anymore at all. So that was really a tricky adjustment for us. Something that really helped us though when we got home was the kindness of our community. And so we were part of a mainly music group with our local Anglican church. And these women who ran Mainly Music and all the mums who attended were just phenomenal. And I swear for about a month, we just had this steady stream of cooked meals coming through our door, whether it was zucchini slices or, quiches, baked goods, cookies for the kids. There was just an endless stream of food. And that took so much pressure off me having to think, what am I going to cook for dinner? Because we know that that's the most hated part of parenting, right? Is working out what's for dinner. And so when you're already in crisis and trying to adjust to everything, the thought of just going, I know what I can get for dinner, just grab something out of the fridge that someone's cooked for me, brings you so much comfort and so much peace. And the other thing that meant a lot to me was, that people have given so much of their time. They've gone and shopped for this. They've spent their time cooking and they've dropped it off for you. And I know food isn't a love language, but I think it should be because there are many times in my life where I feel like someone bringing you food just brings so much comfort and peace. And it meant a lot to us in our challenging times to have that handed to us from people in our community. So we were really grateful for that. The other thing we didn't realize at the time too was what a challenge it would be to have a child with a portacath inserted. So when we left Sydney, the oncology team had said, look, he's got a port. It's very rare, but occasionally if they spike a high temperature, you'll need to go to hospital because it could mean that he has an infection in his port. And, it's pretty unlikely, but you need to be aware of it. So we're like, okay. And we also had protocols from our endocrine team where if Paddy had a temperature over 38, we also needed to administer him a stress dose of steroids, because due to the damage where his pituitary gland was, when Paddy has a virus or illness or any kind of major accident with his body, it's unable to send up the stress hormone he needs to keep him alive and fight off that virus. And so essentially we need to make sure we're medicating Paddy anytime he's unwell, because it can end up actually killing him. His body depletes itself so much just trying to fight off this virus that it can be fatal. And so there was another significant reason to be really wary of temperatures. And what we found is once we got back home, we knew Paddy slept horribly in hospital, and we kind of just assumed that was part of, nurses doing OBS, and no one sleeps well in hospital. But what we hadn't realized is that when you lose your sight, it also impacts your sleep patterns in a really significant way. And so for most of us who are sighted, when the sun goes down and the light changes, it sends a message through our eyes to release melatonin in the brain and basically prepare us for sleep. And it sets up our circadian rhythms, so our regular sleeping patterns. Because Paddy had no light perception, that message wasn't getting through. And so his body could release melatonin essentially any time of the day, and he had no circadian rhythm sleep pattern whatsoever. And so we would find with Paddy, he'd wake at like 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning most nights, ready to start the day. And it was when he'd wake up, in the middle of the night, that we'd just check his temp, and often he felt hot. And so many of our admissions to hospital would actually happen in the middle of the night, which always made things feel so much more dramatic, I think, than during the day as well. And so, it's 1 a.m. and you're on the phone to 000 calling an ambulance for your child to take him across to Wagga Base. And then, the next morning that Audrey's going to wake up and half her family's disappeared again. Where have they gone? Are they going to be there tomorrow when I wake up? It's so disruptive. And what was said to be a rare occurrence, sadly, with Paddy, happened really frequently. And so we went through a period when we first returned home of nearly like fortnightly being admitted to hospital with temperatures. And this had a big impact on our mental health, our sleep, our ability to start life again when we returned home, because it felt like we just got here and then within a short period of time we've got a temp and we're off to Wagga again. And so this endless cycle of being hospitalised continued, and you add to that the fact that he's still also on weekly chemo, so you're in hospital for chemotherapy as well. Our life just felt really chaotic and really, really out of control. Add to that the fact that we had people who wanted to do a fundraiser for us. And I'm not sure if I recall correctly, but I feel like it was on our way home from Sydney that we had a message off them saying, hey, we want to do a fundraiser for you guys. What do you think? And Fred and I had been talking in the car about it, and we both were a bit ick. Like, we are not victim mentality people, and we've never played victim in our lives. So this was not the time for us to cry, poor us. And so the idea of a fundraiser was actually our worst nightmare. Like, my biggest fear was a GoFundMe page, with our picture on it or something like that. It's just not what we wanted, and it wasn't who we were. And maybe that was a bit arrogant, but we felt quite resilient and like we didn't actually need help. So I said to her, look, I think we'd probably pass. Like, we're not really big on the idea of a fundraiser. And she said, look, it'll just be a small thing, like we're thinking a gold coin donation in a bucket at the footy, a sausage sizzle or something at the rugby union ground. And my husband used to play union for quite a few years with the club. So we were like, oh, look, it's not going to hurt, I guess. It's only a small thing. Sure. All right, go ahead. And then a few days later, I was on social media and I saw our family photo, which we'd had taken while we were up in Randwick. And I shared on my Facebook page, for family and friends to see it. Suddenly this family photo is now on a GoFundMe page and everyone's writing their comments and donating money. And I thought, oh, no, this is exactly what I feared and hated. And now it's happening. And so we got straight on the phone to this relative and said, look, I'm sorry, but no, you need to take it down. We don't want a GoFundMe page. We've said it was going to be a small sausage thing. Like, we don't want a GoFundMe, take it down. And so she did, which was great. And then one of our trips, we were in hospital with Paddy. We'd done a tag team as we did. And so I'd gone to Wagga and Fred had come back home and he'd decided to duck down the street and get a haircut. And when he got to the hairdressers, here's this A3 poster that has, again, our family photo on it and a picture of Paddy from the ICU, which was so confronting because when I shared that on my social media, we had a discussion about it, like, should we actually put that up? Like, it's a pretty intense picture. But at the same time, we were quite happy because it was a picture of us with Paddy, like, having a hug. So intense because he had all the tubes in, but for us, kind of a sweet moment because we finally got to hold our boy after the surgery. And so we had shared it on Facebook, not with the intention that would ever be plastered across our town on posters. And so now here's Fred going for a haircut with our family photo, the ICU picture, and Wallace family fundraiser up on most of the windows of the shops in our town. And I have to say, like, when you're going through the trauma that we were with Paddy and still so thick in the medical side of things, to come home and see yourself plastered like that just felt like such a violation and so confronting. Like, we already felt overwhelmed about being home and back in town, let alone when you're now plastered all over the town as well. And so around this time, to help promote this fundraiser, the local paper decided to do a story as well about Paddy. But they hadn't consulted us at all about the story. And I assume they'd spoken to this same relative that was now organising the fundraiser. And so again, here are these pictures that were just for our family and friends on social media, now shared with the entire town, along with information that was factually incorrect about Paddy and his diagnosis and what he'd gone through. And it just killed me because it's not a story. It was our freaking life. And it was just plastered everywhere without our consent. I still don't get how the paper didn't contact us to check before they ran that story. But small town journalism, it is what it is. And I don't want to sound ungrateful because I do understand that the intention of this family member was to help us out. Like, they wanted to just do a fundraiser for us. But we'd said from the very beginning that we didn't want anything, let alone something big. And so Fred contacted the family member and just said, "What are you doing? My wife's beside herself. This isn't what we wanted." She didn't take that feedback particularly well because I guess her intention felt so different to what our reality was in that moment. But by then, the ship had sailed as well, and there was so many businesses in town that had gotten on board to take part in this big fundraising day, and they had auction items, and it had turned into a phenomenon of sorts. And so we realized we couldn't pull the pin on that, but she needed to know that this is not what we asked for, and the way she's gone about it has actually made us feel worse and not better. And so it was a really tricky time for us to try and navigate that. We turned up to the fundraiser because we felt like if everyone's showing up for us, then we should show up as well. And part of me wanted to show everyone Paddy's okay. Like, in my head, he was okay. And it was challenging, but like I said, when we came from Sydney and we'd seen such horror stories there, we actually felt like we were okay and we would be fine. And I wanted people to be able to see us and see Paddy and realize that as well. I don't know why, but it's just, I have a real thing, I guess, about being painted as a victim and vulnerable. And so I wanted to make sure they knew we weren't, which failed horribly because I decided I'd say a thank you speech to everyone who was there. And my main intent with that was that I wanted everyone in that room to know that the thing that causes the most deaths amongst children is brain cancer. More than any other illness or disease, brain cancer claims more lives of children in Australia than anything else. And I remember when I heard that stat, and you look at Paddy and you think it was so rare that this would happen to him, but actually, we have an issue in our country with brain cancer in kids, and I didn't know about that. And so if I didn't know, who else didn't know? And I really wanted that to be said, and if nothing else, we could educate people of this problem we had. And I went to speak and nothing came out, and I just cried because I thought, this is so overwhelming and I just can't even find any words to communicate, which was, I'm a teacher. My job is to stand in front of people and communicate. And suddenly I couldn't do that. And Fred stepped in for me instead, which I'm really grateful for, and, shared our message and thanked everyone on behalf of our family. And the day rolled on, and at the end, it was one of those moments where, again, you realize how supported and loved you are in a town. And that's what we took away from that day. Like, yes, the process leading up to it was really quite challenging for us to go through. But the outcome in that we felt love and support from our community. We had some financial benefit, obviously, with a fundraiser that now would help us out with Paddy and his journey for treatment, because it was going to be not just the 12 months, but a long journey for Paddy. I remember our oncologist saying, this isn't a sprint, this is a marathon. So just knowing we had some financial support throughout our marathon actually gave us a lot of comfort as well. And so, we're quite at peace now with the process of the fundraiser. And I hesitate on whether to share this on the podcast or not, but I think it needs to be, because I just know that we all want to help. Like, it's our instinct when we see someone in need to want to help. But I think it's really important to highlight the fact that if you want to help, you need to also be respectful of people's boundaries. And you need to do that in a way that doesn't expose them more than they already feel exposed, if that makes sense, in a respectful way, basically. The other challenge we had in coming home was that obviously we're in the newspaper, people have seen fundraiser. So it felt like the whole town knew what was happening, or thought they did, because the information wasn't quite correct. And so as a mum, I'd go down to Woolies to get the groceries, and suddenly everyone in town wanted to stop and ask, how you going? What's going on? Where's Paddy up to? And again, one of those, well-intentioned, people care and they want to check you're okay. But when you're already in crisis and you just want to get your groceries and go home, it's really overwhelming. And it did eventually get to the point where I started having anxiety attacks, which I didn't realize at the time were anxiety attacks, but I'll explain that in another episode. Just trying to go and do the simple things. And so I think it's important for people, especially in small towns where we do all know each other and we do all care, to sometimes just smile and walk past someone. You don't have to stop and ask all the time, particularly if you're not a close friend. If you're a close friend, you probably knew what was going on. And so otherwise, just let people do their shopping. And, thank God now for click and collect if people are in that situation. That wasn't an option for us at the time. But again, it's that respecting that someone's in crisis and they probably don't want to talk about that at Woolworths, and they certainly don't want to talk about that when they have their children with them as well, because you're not going to get an honest answer for how they're really going when their child is standing there right next to you. So something I found that helped us with that, and helped with kind of counteracting the newspaper article and things where our truth and our reality was being, in a way, manipulated and misrepresented. And I cannot stand for that. Integrity is one of my highest values, and you live by what you say and you act in a way that reinforces that. And so anytime I see that not displayed, particularly in relation to my own life and my own narrative, then it really just does not sit well with me. And so what we did in order to kind of counteract that and also help with my anxiety about going downtown was to do a Facebook post updating people with how things were going. People knew where Paddy was up to. Oh, he's just been for treatment. Oh, okay, he's had a scan and, the treatment's working. That's good. And then I felt then people didn't have to ask me that down the street because they already knew. So they could just say hi, and I could say hi, and we'd keep walking. And I know not everyone wants to share what's happening in their life too, so it's not for everyone. But for us in a small community where people were always going to be curious, interested and caring, we found that being able to just put a message up on there actually took a lot of pressure off us as parents. And particularly down the track when, news sometimes wasn't always positive, and you're trying to deliver that to someone in the main street and they're crying in front of you because they don't know what to do. And we found social media really helped us in a situation where we had no control over the chaos that was happening around us. That gave us something we could actually control. And it made us feel like our truth was being shared, and that was really important for us. So that helped a lot in coming home. So a lot of takeaways from this. It was a challenging time and not as joyful as we thought coming home would be. So I guess key takeaway number one is to be aware, if you've gone through a major life shift or challenge, that it's going to feel uncomfortable in your old life now for quite a while, because so much has changed, and you can't underestimate how impactful that is when you try and return to an old life, but you're no longer the person or the family that you were. And so I think it's important to give yourself a bit of grace and a bit of time. And it's okay to hate your new normal. That's where we got to. We just hated it. But I think the challenge and the sweet spot comes in not trying to fit into your old life anymore and making peace with the fact that life is not the way you thought it was going to be, but now you need to create your own. And that's something I'll go into more in a later episode. The other takeaway I have for you is that cooking is so lovely. Please, if someone's having a tough time, just bake them a meal. They can put it in the freezer. You just drop and run. But for that person, it will mean so much. And don't underestimate, it's always the power of the small things. You know, picking a bunch of flowers and dropping them off for someone just brightens their day so much in a challenging time. We can't fix their problem, but we can do things that show we love and care about people. And that's so impactful and important. Third point, respect people's boundaries. We know we want to help each other and that's important, but make sure we're doing it in a way that respects and honours the needs of that person at the time. Because at the end of the day, they're the one in crisis and the one in trauma, and we don't want to add to that. We actually want to take away and try and make their life better. So respecting boundaries is the only way to do that. And finally, I think it's really important that we let people own their narratives. Don't try and speak for other people. Let them share how they're feeling and what their truth is, because in doing so, you're giving them power. And there are times where, we do need to advocate for others and we do need people to speak for us, but don't appoint yourself to that role. Wait to be asked if people want you to speak for them. Otherwise, let them own their truth and their narrative and share it in a way that suits them, because that will empower them so much more. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. I really appreciate you coming back each week to learn a little more about our journey. I hope this episode has given you something to reflect on or some tools that you can implement in your own life. If you know someone who could benefit from this episode, please share it with your family or friends. It would mean so much to me. Remember to stay positive, be grateful, and take each step of the journey with kindness and love in your heart. Until next time, bye.